happy to be here, and we have an adventure planned for this service. We are definitely going to go on a trip, and as the Course says, it's a journey without distance. So, one of the things that we've continually have come back to is that these sacred teachings are really about remembering your original nature. And your original nature is always present, it's infinite. And so there's nowhere it is not. And so we have this practice of turning our attention onto what we've been ignoring. Right? This is why we are referred to within the sacred teachings as caught in ignorance, because we just keep ignoring it. It's right here. We're breathing it, we're living it, in it we live, move, and have our being. And so this ignorance, if we can say it, it's a focal setting of our consciousness. It's a way of paying attention. So what we pay attention to, what we focus upon, we make real. And that becomes our life, our identity, in the way that things seem to unfold and happen. And when we're caught in ignorance, we don't realize it's because of our focal setting that our life looks the way it does. We think things are just happening, and we're at the victim or effect level of them. We're not in control of that. We didn't do anything to cause that. And what we want to recognize this morning is we're causing it by the way we focus and pay attention and choose to exist from our own standpoint. That's why, this whole service can be centered around this famous quote from Albert Einstein. You can never solve the problem at the level in which it is occurring. You can never solve the problem at the level in which it occurred. So in other words, there's something that requires a shift in consciousness. If you're trying to fix the problem at the level in which it is occurring, then you're always going to simply have repeating problems, the same issues, the same dysfunctional patterns will keep emerging and repeating. You can never solve the problem at the level in which it's occurring, which means you have to change your consciousness. And this is the whole purpose of these teachings. The teaching is basically, I'm seeing what I'm focusing on. And when I change my focal setting, I will change what I'm seeing. Right? This is the way it works, and we're going to unpack it this morning through the teachings of Buddhism and A Course in Miracles. And we're going to start with a poem from St. John of the Cross. Okay? So before we get into our readings and discussion, just take a moment here to settle in, breathe, slow down, relax. Open to the mystery that is always here and always now. As you continue to breathe and relax, become ever present of the witnessing state, the one who's listening, the one who's aware, the one who's watching. And as we meditate, it really is simply turning our attention onto this awareness that we are. And this awareness is like empty space. Things may arise within the empty sky like clouds and birds and all sorts of phenomena, but the sky of mind never changes. It never ceases to be vast and open and clear. And this is our deepest nature, like the empty sky. Simply aware. As you bring your hands to heart, feel this awareness centering within the very core of your heart center. The sacred presence that is shared by all sentient life, that we are all this awareness. And we acknowledge it as the center and source of all that we are. And in this is unity. Namaste. So we're going to start with a poem from St. John of the Cross. He was a Spanish mystic of the Catholic Church, a friend and confidant of St. Teresa of Avila. He is somebody who has tasted this higher state or this higher life, and he writes of it beautifully. This is a bit of a longer poem, so I might cut it down. I'm not sure. We'll see how it flows. But this is actually, as it's titled, verses written after an ecstasy of high exaltation. So St. John begins with this. I entered in, I know not where, and I remained, though knowing naught, transcending knowledge with my thought. Now, I want to pause here just because in the Spanish, when he says transcending knowledge, he's using the word ciencia, which can also mean science, right? So intellectual thinking, conceptual thinking. So he's going beyond the boundaries of science and concepts and thought at the human level. Of when I entered, I know not, but when I saw that I was there, though where it was, I did not care. Strange things I learned, with greatness fraught, yet what I heard I'll not declare. But there I stayed, though knowing naught, transcending knowledge with my thought. Of peace and piety interwound, this perfect science had been wrought within the solitude profound. A straight and narrow path it taught. Such secret wisdom there I found, that there I stammered, saying naught, but topped all knowledge with my thought. So borne aloft, so drunken, reeling, so rapt I was, so swept away within the scope of sense or feeling, my sense or feeling could not stay, and in my soul I felt, revealing a sense that, though its sense was naught, transcendent knowledge with my thought. The man who truly there has come, of his own self must shed the guise of all he knew before. The sum seems so far beneath that wondrous prize. And in this lore he grows so wise that he remains, though knowing naught, transcending knowledge with my thought, with his thought. The farther that I climbed the height, the less I seemed to understand the cloud so tenebrous and grand that there illuminates the night. For he who understands that sight remains for aye, though knowing naught, transcending knowledge with his thought. This wisdom without understanding is of so absolute a force, no wise man of whatever standing can ever stand against its course, unless they tap its wondrous source. To know so much, though knowing naught, they pass all knowledge with their thought. This summit all so steeply towers, and is of excellence so high, no human faculties or powers can ever to the top come nigh. Whoever with its steep could vie, though knowing nothing, would transcend all thought forever without end. If you would ask, what is its essence? This summit of all sense and knowing, it comes from the divinest presence. The sudden sense of Him outflowing in His great clemency, bestowing the gift that leaves men knowing naught, yet passing knowledge with their thought. So we've been really on this point for many weeks now of knowing that we don't know. And that not knowing, that childlike simplicity is the gateway into true understanding. St. John and many of his ilk are classified under what's called apophatic mysticism. And apophatic mysticism in Latin is also often referred to as via negativa, the way of negation, the cloud of unknowing, knowing naught. He kept saying that in the poem, knowing nothing, knowing nothing, knowing nothing, and yet passing all knowledge, all science with this thought. This is the way in, utter simplicity and knowing that you don't know. Right? There's a passage within one of the Hebrew prophets, the prophet Ezekiel. In his vision, he sees a valley of dead bones. And he hears the voice of God speak to him and says, Son of man. In fact, the Hebrew word is Ben Adam. It could be translated earthling. Earthling, can these bones live? And the prophet, having the right attitude, knowing how to relate to the divine, says, I don't know. Only you know. And right there is the secret to entering in, right? Beautifully displayed. I don't know. You know. And then through the vision, he experienced this joining together of the bones, the weaving of sinew, the standing up, the enfleshing of this army of skeletons now alive. And our life is like that. Our life, oftentimes, like we had said, when we look at our problems from a certain focal setting, it's like we're living death. It's like our life isn't joyous. In fact, in A Course in Miracles, he says, you never really have had a thought that was purely happy. Think about that. We are living within this veil of tears. We're trying to find happiness. We're trying to find pleasure and relief from this gnawing sense of pain or existential dread or hearing the clock ticking. We only have a few years left maybe, and what's my life really amounting to? It's been a bucket of problems for the most part. I haven't found lasting happiness. So I'm looking out on a valley of dead men's bones. I'm looking at my past, and I'm just seeing different forms of death. No happiness. Can these dead bones live? I don't know. You know. And in that vertical choice, life can come into your life, right? When we have desire, this is a good way of looking at it. Desire, right? The desire to be happy, the desire to get out of suffering, the desire to feel like our life has meaning and value. Desire is always at a horizontal level. It's always occurring at the level in which you're perceiving it. You see your problems and you desire something at this level to make your problems go away, and you can't figure out what it's going to be. And you try a million things and they never really give you the solution or the lasting happiness. Aspiration is different. Desire is horizontal. Aspiration is vertical. Your choice now isn't which desire to choose. Your choice is, I go to him. I go to the source for my supply. I go to the source to solve my problems. Right? So this is where we're going this morning. And we're doing it in a very subtle way, which I hope sets off bombs in your awareness. Because we have to do a demolition project in some sense. Because we've built these walls of enclosure. And as we're going to see when we consult the Tibetan teachings of Tartang Toku, that these walls that we have set up have enclosed us in what he's calling lower space, little space. We're living in space, but the space that we're living in is just more and more problems and dualistic concepts and never being able to find lasting happiness and seeing death everywhere. That's the space we're living in. And we stay enclosed within this space because we don't realize our focal setting is completely off. And we're ignoring what the Tibetans call Longchen. We're ignoring great space. We're ignoring the Father, right? In whom we live and move and have our being. And so these walls have to come down so that our little space can actually merge with great space. And then we will see from a very different focal setting that what we thought were to be problems were actually not problems at all. It was from where we were looking, how we were looking at them, what we thought ourselves to be. And as we're going to consult A Course in Miracles, he says you're either in this great space, the sky of the Eternal Father, knowing yourself as a luminous being, eternal, or you're an idol. And when you're an idol, you're constricted and little and caught within the space of fear. And you're looking outside yourself for other idols to help you get out of your suffering so that you can be happy as an idol, as this little self. And so we're going to see that's a project doomed to failure. So let's get into it. And like I said, this is a very subtle teaching. So one of the things that might be required is for you to keep coming back to your breath, not focusing so hard on trying to understand the concepts. Really come from this I don't know mind, settled, confident that you're going to understand, because in truth, this is your nature. This is your natural inheritance. It's who you are. The other thing I want to say before we get into the readings is a quote from A Course in Miracles that in many ways parallels Einstein's quote from before. And that is when Jesus tells us, all shallow roots must be uprooted. All shallow roots must be uprooted. And he's talking about these shallow identities that we have, our shallow life. As we're going to see, we have cut ourselves off from our depth. We've cut ourselves off from our source and from the joy of our happiness by simply our focal setting. And we keep coming back to the choice of seeing that illustration of the old woman or the young woman. The same picture has two different realities. And depending on what you're focusing on, that's the reality you're going to see. Right? So shallow roots must be uprooted. And as a result of doing this demolition work, we have to begin to cultivate a deep sense of non-attachment, a willingness to let go of what we've been holding on to. Because as St. John of the Cross was saying, when we begin to know nothing and we begin to taste this divine presence, everything that's below that presence becomes valueless, utterly worthless, because we've gone back into great space. And being in great space, we are no longer attracted to idols, to little things that block the light. So this is an interesting book, Time, Space, and Knowledge, A New Vision of Reality by Tartung Tulku. He was born in Tibet. He was educated as a Tulku, and a Tulku is a reincarnating Lama. So in Tibetan Buddhism, when you're considered a Tulku, it means that you are an ancient teacher that keeps coming back, like a master teacher. And so you're recognized. Oftentimes, great lamas will have dreams and visions, and they'll go and they'll find the little child that was born. You probably have seen this. And they'll lay out on the table in front of the 3-year-old different mala beads and different bells and different necklaces and things that the other lama wore before he passed. And the child will then select what it is that it knew of its former life, right? It's quite remarkable that they have this understanding within their very culture that birth is not a beginning, it's a continuation. And as a result of being a Tulku, brought up in Tibet, receiving this great perfection teaching, he came to the West and began to teach it in a way for Westerners to begin to understand, without the cultural trappings of Tibetan Buddhism, what these great perfection teachings are really getting at. We're only going to touch on them this morning. But it really comes down to how we have been ignoring what's right in front of us. He says this: at a certain point, we may wonder whether our usual emphasis on objects and our relative indifference to space is not misguided. Is existence at bottom really space? Can space itself be the fundamental nature of existence that we seek elsewhere or simply ignore? So, are we in space right now? You better believe it. And when we really look, what we've been trained to think of as real and factual are objects, right? Solid things. But we know when we examine these solid things, when we keep drilling down below the surface of appearance, these solid things are not so solid. We all know this. The amount of space in an atom is like an apple in the center of a football field, and the electron is way up in the stands, and all of this is empty space. The atom is a minuscule amount of matter, mostly empty space. Everything really is rooted within and continues to remain space. Our focal setting, he's saying, is misguided. We are constantly hypnotized to focus on objects. And it's because, I would submit, that we believe we're this idol. We're an object in our awareness. Our awareness has chosen to be an object, John, this body. And as a result, John's going to see what John is. John's an object, and John's going to focus on objects and ignore the Father. Right? The Course says this. The ego looks directly at the Father and knows him not. The Father is great space. We've never left this presence. So are we misguided? Is space at the bottom of our existence? Is it really who we are? Are we divine space? Infinite potential. Think if that is true, your current view of yourself as this little object with a little life and all of your horizontal desires trying to get idols to do what you want. What a recipe for disaster. What suffering when you are infinite space, pretending that you're this little idol with all these unmet desires, and never happy, never satisfied. Now he gets into something here that's going to become increasingly profound. The general relationships and contrasts which we ordinarily find to hold between space and things can be taken as an interesting and suggestive aspect of our realm as a whole. Now listen, we can see from them this relationship between space and things. The possibility that our familiar reality is an expression or variation of another, more unified reality, but has unfolded in such a way as to give significance to dualistic categories. In other words, we've entered this fishbowl of space, right? This 3D space. And within this field of our current experience, dualistic concepts are what's being manufactured from this space. Self and other, inside and outside, all of these different fragmented thoughts and feelings are actually being generated within this lower matrix of space. And it's an echo or a distortion, he's saying, of something that's more unified and beyond. Okay? Just keep letting these little drops fall in. It's going to get clearer as we go. Contemplating space as a result of pushing our examination of existence as far as we can actually guides our awareness into new types of spaces until we can reach a kind of space that is, in more than a symbolic way, the ground of everything. So what he's saying is the importance of meditation is to become very still and watchful and realize that there is a space that we can feel in this room between bodies and chairs and objects. And then as we go into more of a deepening contemplation, we realize that our thoughts, they arise within space. Our emotions arise within space. Our bodily sensations arise within space. And he goes as far as saying that when these thoughts, feelings, bodily emotions, bodies and chairs and objects, they come into existence, right? They come from space. They're made of space, if you really look. And then they fall back into space. They dissolve. Everything does this. That's why he's saying, really, it's space projecting space into space. There's nothing here, really, but space. Vast, free, luminous. Our focal setting within this little space has been conditioned to think of concepts as dualistic, objects as solid and real. But it's not upon closer examination. The ego is looking directly at the Father. If conducted properly, this type of engagement can result in the attainment of a new kind of focal setting, one which is not just a macro or micro adjustment within a particular space, but one which actually opens up qualitatively new spaces. You feel yourself expand, become more luminous, bright, clear, expansive, spiritualized. Right? New focal settings. Your problems are not going to be solved at this focal setting. Can't do it. So this is where it gets really rich and pretty wild. Okay? Now, keep in mind as we're going to bring in the teachings of St. Paul in a moment, because Tartang Tokul, what he's about to say, is so close to what Paul says in one of his letters in the New Testament. I couldn't help but show you the comparison, because what we're going to see is in the Tibetan teachings, they have this understanding of how our lower local space is very much like what the movie The Matrix is showing you. It's a simulation of entrapment. Listen. Aside from the familiar observed space of our realm, a more pervasive condition, which could be called lower space, is also present as a function of a particular type of focal setting. So he's saying you're looking at your 3D space. Now, on a more subtle level, an etheric level, there is a focal setting, which is actually what our minds are picking up. It's a frequency. And this subtler frequency he calls lower space. And this is what's conditioning all space. St. Paul's going to call it the prince of the power of the air. the spirit that works in the children of disobedience. In other words, this etheric, satanic, if you will, because that's where Paul's going with it, frequency that's causing a simulation within our lower space to keep us at war, to keep us at odds, to keep us in conflict, to keep us ignorant of who we are. Now, it doesn't have to be because we're in charge of our focal setting. But when we're asleep and ignoring that, we are children of disobedience. Okay. We do not notice that this condition of lower space is in effect until we discover alternative settings or adjustments. Once we can recognize lower space, it becomes clear that this condition influences what is and what happens in our world, our relationships, our emotions, our mental states, our moods, our weather patterns, our institutions. It's the Spirit that worketh in the sons of disobedience. Can I get an amen? So he says, again, listen to that. It becomes clear once we can, settle in and tune in to our deeper presence and deeper awareness that there is this frequency, there is this local space. The Course will call it the ego thought system. It's ubiquitous, it's etheric, it's frequency. Once we tune into this, we can see, by contrast of our pure awareness, that this lower space is conditioning and influencing what happens in our world. Right? Like the new notion of space adopted by some branches of modern physics as being an active, structuring medium which cannot be separated from objects in space, this lower local space is responsible for the character of all events and appearances perceived in space. If we accept what occurs within our realm at face value and are not aware of the structuring power of this lower space, this frequency field, appearances become false or misleading in the sense that it's more fulfilling and significant dimensions elude us. We get cut off from the higher mind, right? The higher self, the joy, the peace, the happiness. We get stuck within these little identities, within these lower objects. And we seem to live here. And this is who we are, and this is what everything is. Right? So one of the things we want to recognize is all shallow roots must be uprooted. If you're here for these teachings, you got to be prepared to uproot some of your shallow roots. And these shallow roots are where you've been rooted. You've been rooted in the soil of this lower space. It's been your habitat. It's been your home. And it's everything you think you know about everything and everyone. And it's preconditioned to cause conflict. It's preconditioned to upset you and to depress you and to have you end in despair. It's a veil of tears. It's a frequency of tears. All the ancients knew this. We can ignore it. We can numb out. We can distract and, self-medicate or do whatever we want. But we're not going to change our problems until we change our focal setting. Right? A little bit more here. It is as if we were being manipulated by a sort of local petty official in charge of this frequency matrix. Right? The Gnostics called it the demiurge. Again, the Course calls it the ego thought system. It is as if we were being manipulated by a sort of local petty official whose power actually derives from a larger government and whose actions express the will of that government. This petty official does not inform us of the source or purpose of his commands. Maybe he himself is governing clandestinely, and so we cannot correctly judge our situation. And finally here. So as we learn to move into higher spaces, we may gain more understanding of problems that are relevant but seem insoluble within this lower space. Dichotomies like existence and non-existence, object and space become resolved in the light of different and more accurate conceptions. Some problems cannot be answered in the same terms in which they are posed, and different levels of space involve different answers and different unanswerable questions. And finally here, these dichotomies and questions are often the best indicators of what facets of a higher message have become locally blocked out or garbled. If we attend to them as interesting symbols or pointers rather than as intractable problems, they may help us open up. What he's basically saying is, where we are encountering conflict, resistance, upset, look into it. See what it's presenting. It's always a way of looking that can open up this healing space in you. You can't solve the problem at the level in which it's occurring, because the level which it's really occurring at is your deeper consciousness. These are your projections. So to actually heal and open up these higher spaces within you, problems can become medicine. If we're no longer projecting and staying at this lower focal setting and trying to make the idol right, but we realize that there's something that this problem, this person, underneath what they're saying is teaching me, and I'll listen from that focal setting. Why is this happening? Why is this occurring in such a way? What is it saying about me? How am I showing up in this situation? When we begin to look at ourselves in the face of our problems and challenges, we begin to have this opportunity to open up a different perspective that wasn't there before, because we're taking responsibility for our projection. Right? This is what he's saying. They become pointers rather than problems, and they may help us open up. Different channels which are available but blocked and unused in this realm may open and function again. We can travel farther and farther, always opening more and more. So that's another element of what we're saying this morning, that when we meditate and we enter into these deeper spaces open up to divine presence, we begin to actualize these latent channels of perception. More light, more information, more understanding begins to come into our system. And as a result of bringing in more light, more knowledge, more truth, we begin to actually break down the walls of the lower spaces that have kept minds stuck within these repetitive experiences, these dysfunctional dynamics. Okay? So this is A Course in Miracles, chapter 30, the thought God holds of you. So when we allow ourselves to go into this place of not knowing and openness and allowing all of these problems to be, I don't know, you know, having that approach, we can open to this greater space. And listen to how it's described. The thought God holds of you is like a star, unchangeable in an eternal sky. So high in heaven is it set that those outside of heaven know not it is there, but still and white and lovely will it shine through all eternity. There was no time it was not there, no instant when its light grew dimmer or less perfect ever was. Who knows the Father knows this light, for he is the eternal sky, right? Great space, Longchen, which holds this star safe, forever lifted up and anchored sure. Its perfect purity does not depend on whether it is seen on earth or not. The sky embraces it and softly holds it in its perfect place, which is as far from earth as earth from heaven. It is not the distance nor the time which keeps this star invisible to earth, but those who seek for idols cannot know this star is there. Focal setting. Beyond all idols is the thought God holds of you, completely unaffected by the turmoil and the terror of the world, right? This lower space or frequency matrix or simulation. Notice how it's described. Turmoil and terror. That's what's being broadcast within the lower space, yes? I mean, are we paying attention? The dreams of birth and death that are here dreamed, the myriad forms that fear can take, quite undisturbed, the thought God holds of you remains exactly as it always was. And he's saying to us, if we no longer want to make the idol real, we will know ourselves as this star in the great sky, right here, right now. This is the great perfection, and this is the immediacy of salvation. Change your focal setting, and you change where you think you are and what you are. Surrounded by stillness so complete, no sound of battle comes remotely near. This star that you are rests in certainty and perfect peace. Here is your one reality kept safe, completely unaware of all the world that worships idols and that knows not God, right? That are children of disobedience, influenced by the frequency or spirit of the prince of the power of the air, Ha-Satan. In perfect sureness of its changelessness and of its rest in its eternal home, the thought God holds of you has never left the mind of its creator, whom it knows as its creator. Where could the thought God holds of you exist but where you are? Is your reality a thing apart from you? And in a world which your reality knows nothing of? Outside you, there is no eternal sky, no changeless star, and no reality. The mind of heaven's Son in heaven is, for there the mind of Father and Son, you could even say mother and child, as they do in Dzogchen, join in creation, which can have no end. You have not two realities, but one, nor can you be aware of more than one. An idol, or the thought God holds of you, is your reality. Forget not then that idols must keep hidden what you are, not from the mind of God, but from your own. The star shines still, the sky has never changed, but you, the Holy Son of God himself, are unaware of your reality. Blue bag will go around. If you are joining on Facebook or YouTube, you can click the link in the comments section and donate to the 8 a.m. service. We thank you for your offering. We bless the offering and charge it with the intention that all beings may find true happiness and true wisdom. And so it is. Amen. All right, my friends, let's rise. Space, rising in space. And as we settle into this present moment, just really feel porous and open, like even your thoughts are open. There's that Zen saying, opening the hand of thought, that everything becomes open, spacious, not clung to, not solid, just like space. Everything becomes like space. And we realize that we are in this infinite sky already, shining bright as this pure awareness, where the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day, my friends. Course in Miracles tomorrow night, 7:15. Joel Goldsmith begins Tuesday at 7:15. All right, my friends. Thank you.